The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Detective Inspector Sarah Chun walked through the ornate gates. She had received an urgent call just after dawn, something about Prince George and evidence that could not wait. The royal protection officers who met her at the entrance looked unusually tense, their faces grave with an importance she had rarely seen in her 15 years of service with the Metropolitan Police. Sarah had worked with the royal family before on discreet matters, but nothing had prepared her for what awaited her in the castle's private quarters. The call had come from Commander James Morrison, head of the prince's protection detail, a man known for his unflappable demeanor. Yet his voice on the phone had carried an edge of urgency that made Sarah drop her morning coffee and drive straight to Windsor. Prince George, now 16 and growing into the responsibilities that would one day be his, had discovered something in his private study that morning. The young prince had been preparing for his history exam when he noticed that one of his personal laptops seemed to have been tampered with. The device, which he used for schoolwork and personal research, contained files that shouldn't have been there, files that painted a disturbing picture of surveillance and potential threats within the very walls meant to protect him. As Sarah was escorted through the castle's corridors, she couldn't help but notice the heightened security presence. Additional guards stood at strategic points, their eyes scanning every corner with an alertness that suggested they were dealing with something far more serious than a typical security concern. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and staff members moved with the quick, purposeful steps of people who knew something significant was unfolding. Commander Morrison met Sarah at the entrance to the family's private wing. His usually pristine uniform showed signs of a sleepless night, and his typically steady hands trembled slightly as he briefed her on the situation. Prince George had contacted him directly at 5:30 that morning, bypassing the usual protocols because he believed someone within the security team itself might be compromised. The evidence Prince George had discovered was both sophisticated and deeply troubling. Hidden within seemingly innocent files on his laptop were detailed surveillance reports, photographs taken without permission, and what appeared to be communication logs between unknown parties discussing the prince's daily routines, his friends, and even his private conversations. The young prince had stumbled upon this information while trying to recover a deleted essay file, using recovery software he had learned to use during his computer science classes. What made the discovery even more alarming was the timestamp on the files. They had been created and modified during times when only trusted security personnel and close family members had access to the prince's quarters. The files contained information that could only have been gathered by someone with intimate knowledge of the royal family's private schedules and security arrangements. Sarah was shown to a secure room where Prince George waited with his personal secretary and a senior royal protection officer. Despite his youth, the prince displayed a maturity and composure that impressed her immediately. He had clearly inherited the royal family's ability to remain calm under pressure, but she could see the concern in his eyes as he prepared to share what he had found. "Inspector Chun," Prince George began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I believe someone has been watching me very closely, and I don't think it's just for my protection." He gestured to the laptop that sat open on the table between them, its screen displaying folders with innocuous names that belied their sinister contents. The first file Prince George showed her contained detailed logs of his movements over the past 6 months. Not just his official engagements, which were naturally well documented for security purposes, but his private activities as well. Someone had been tracking when he went to bed, when he woke up, what he ate for breakfast, who he spoke with on the phone, and even which books he checked out from the castle's library. More disturbing were the photographs. Hundreds of images that appeared to have been taken with a telephoto lens from various locations around the castle grounds. Some showed Prince George in his private garden. Others captured him through windows of rooms that were supposed to be completely secure. The angles and quality of the photographs suggested they had been taken by someone with professional surveillance equipment and extensive knowledge of the castle's layout. But it was the communication logs that truly alarmed Sarah. Encrypted messages between parties identified only by code names discussed the prince's routine in clinical detail. They referenced the asset's schedule, debated the best times for observation, and made cryptic references to preparation for the next phase. The language was cold and professional, the kind used by intelligence operatives or private security contractors. Prince George explained how he had discovered the files by accident. While working late on a history project about World War II resistance movements, he had accidentally deleted several hours of work. Frustrated and determined not to lose his research, he had downloaded file recovery software and begun searching his computer's memory for the lost document. Instead, he found fragments of files that shouldn't have existed on his personal device. His initial curiosity had turned to concern as he recovered more and more of the surveillance data. Using techniques he had learned in his computer science classes, he had been able to reconstruct much of the hidden file system. What he found was a comprehensive surveillance operation that had been running for months without his knowledge or that of his official protection team. The young prince had shown remarkable restraint and wisdom in how he handled the discovery. Rather than confronting anyone directly or sharing the information with friends or family members who might unknowingly compromise the investigation, he had secured the evidence and contacted Commander Morrison through a secure channel he had established for genuine emergencies. Sarah spent the morning examining the evidence in detail, and what she found painted a picture of a sophisticated surveillance operation that went far beyond normal royal protection protocols. The level of detail in the file suggested that whoever was behind this had access not just to Prince George's physical location, but to his digital communications, his academic work, and even his private thoughts expressed in personal journals he kept on his computer. The technical sophistication of the surveillance suggested this was not the work of a lone individual, but rather an organized effort involving multiple people with significant resources and expertise. The encryption used in the communication logs was military-grade, and the surveillance photographs showed techniques typically employed by intelligence agencies rather than private investigators or amateur stalkers. As Sarah delved deeper into the evidence, she began to identify patterns that suggested the surveillance was building towards something more than simple observation. References in the communication logs to Phase 2 and implementation implied that the Watchers were planning some kind of action based on the intelligence they had gathered. The investigation took on even greater urgency when Prince George revealed that he had been experiencing strange incidents over the past several weeks that now took on new significance in light of the surveillance evidence. His personal items had been moved in his room, though staff denied touching anything. He had received strange phone calls with no one on the other end. His computer had been running slowly, which he now realized might have been due to surveillance software running in the background. Most troubling of all, Prince George had noticed that certain conversations he had held in supposedly private locations had somehow become known to people who shouldn't have had access to that information. Comments he made to friends about his weekend plans seemed to reach the ears of staff members who arranged his security. Concerns he expressed privately to his tutor about his academic progress were somehow known to family members he hadn't spoken with directly. The realization that his privacy had been so thoroughly compromised was clearly affecting the young prince, though he maintained his composure throughout the interview. Sarah could see the weight of responsibility he felt, not just for his own safety, but for the potential implications this surveillance might have for his family and the institution of the monarchy itself. As the morning wore on, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what Prince George had uncovered. This was not simply a security breach or a case of overzealous protection officers stepping beyond their mandate. The evidence pointed to a deliberate, systematic effort to gather intelligence about the young prince for purposes that remained unclear, but were certainly unauthorized and potentially dangerous. The discovery raised immediate questions about who could be trusted within the royal household, and how deeply this surveillance network had penetrated the security systems designed to protect the royal family. The fact that the evidence had been hidden on Prince George's own computer suggested that whoever was behind this had the capability to access the most secure areas of the royal residence and plant evidence in locations that should have been completely protected. Sarah realized that she was dealing with a case that could have implications far beyond the immediate threat to Prince George's privacy and safety. If unauthorized parties had this level of access to royal communications and movements, it raised questions about national security and the potential for foreign intelligence services or other hostile actors to gather sensitive information about the British monarchy and government. The evidence Prince George had discovered was just the beginning of what would prove to be a complex investigation involving multiple agencies and touching on some of the most sensitive aspects of royal security. As Sarah prepared to brief her superiors and coordinate with other law enforcement agencies, she couldn't help but admire the young prince's courage and intelligence in handling such a serious situation with such maturity and discretion. The secure conference room at Scotland Yard had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Detective Inspector Sarah Chun sat across from Commander Morrison and three other senior officials whose presence spoke to the gravity of the situation Prince George had uncovered. The afternoon sun filtered through bulletproof windows as they spread the evidence across a table that had seen discussions of terrorism plots and international espionage cases. Director Helen Barnes from MI5 had arrived within hours of Sarah's initial report. Her team had already begun a preliminary analysis of the surveillance files, and their findings were deeply troubling. The sophistication of the operation suggested involvement by parties with access to advanced surveillance technology and extensive resources. This was not the work of amateur stalkers or overzealous tabloid journalists seeking royal scoops. The digital forensics team had made several disturbing discoveries about the hidden files on Prince George's laptop. The surveillance software that had been installed was custom-built, not something that could be purchased commercially or downloaded from the internet. The code bore similarities to programs used by intelligence agencies, though it had been modified to avoid detection by standard security sweeps performed on royal devices. More concerning was the discovery that the surveillance program had been designed to operate across multiple devices and networks. Analysis suggested that similar software might be installed on other royal family computers, smartphones, and even the castle's security systems themselves. The implications were staggering. If confirmed, it would mean that virtually every aspect of royal family life had been under unauthorized observation. Sarah had spent the morning interviewing Prince George in greater detail about the incidents he had noticed over the previous months. The young prince proved to be an observant and reliable witness, able to provide specific dates and details that helped the investigation team establish a timeline for the surveillance operation. His accounts painted a picture of escalating intrusion that had been carefully designed to remain below the threshold of obvious detection. The prince recalled strange occurrences that now took on sinister significance. Books in his private study had been found open to different pages than where he had left them. His computer mouse had sometimes been in a different position when he returned to his desk. Most tellingly, conversations he had held in what he believed were secure locations had somehow become known to people who shouldn't have had access to that information. One particularly disturbing incident had occurred 3 weeks earlier during a private family dinner. Prince George had expressed concerns to his parents about feeling like he was being watched during his private study time. Within days, new security protocols had been implemented around his study schedule, protocols that addressed his specific concerns in ways that suggested someone had overheard his private conversation with his family. The investigation team had immediately launched a comprehensive security review of all personnel with access to the royal family's private quarters. Background checks were being conducted on dozens of staff members, from housekeeping personnel to senior security officers. The process was delicate, as they needed to avoid alerting potential suspects while ensuring the ongoing safety of the royal family. Commander Morrison had implemented emergency security protocols without revealing the specific reason for the heightened measures. He had quietly reassigned several staff members to different duties while the investigation proceeded, using routine scheduling changes as cover. The challenge was maintaining normal operations while conducting what was essentially a counter-espionage investigation within one of Britain's most secure facilities. The technical investigation had revealed the sophistication of the surveillance network. The hidden software on Prince George's computer was designed to activate remotely and transmit data during specific time windows when network activity would be less likely to attract attention. It captured not just files and communications, but also screenshots, keystroke logs, and even audio recordings when the computer's microphone was activated. Digital forensics experts had traced the software's communication patterns and discovered that data was being transmitted to servers located in multiple countries. The routing was deliberately complex, designed to make it nearly impossible to trace the ultimate destination of the stolen information. Whoever had designed this system had extensive knowledge of computer networks and international data transmission protocols. The investigation had taken on international dimensions when MI6 was brought into the case. Their analysts had identified several foreign intelligence services that possessed the technical capabilities demonstrated by the surveillance system. However, they had also noted that private security firms and even criminal organizations had access to similar technology, making it difficult to determine the exact nature of the threat. Prince George had provided investigators with additional evidence that proved crucial to understanding the scope of the operation. He had noticed that his internet search history sometimes contained entries he didn't remember making. When examined closely, these searches revealed patterns that suggested someone was researching his interests, his academic work, and even his friends and their families. The young prince had also discovered that his private email account had been accessed from locations and at times when he was not using his computer. The access log showed login attempts from IP addresses that traced to various locations around the world, suggesting that his credentials had been compromised and were being used by multiple parties. Most disturbing of all was the discovery of a hidden folder on his computer that contained what appeared to be detailed profiles of his friends and acquaintances. These files included photographs, personal information, family details, and even financial records that could only have been obtained through extensive surveillance and investigation. The implication was that the surveillance operation extended far beyond Prince George himself to encompass his entire social circle. The security review had identified several concerning patterns in staff access logs and security recordings. Certain areas of the castle that should have required special authorization to enter showed evidence of unauthorized access during times when no scheduled maintenance or security checks were supposed to occur. Security cameras had been temporarily disabled or repositioned during these incidents, suggesting inside knowledge of the surveillance system. Sarah had worked with the technical team to create a comprehensive timeline of the surveillance operation based on file timestamps, access logs, and Prince George's recollections of suspicious incidents. The timeline suggested that the operation had been planned and implemented over a period of several months, with a gradual escalation in the sophistication and scope of surveillance activities. The investigation had revealed that the surveillance program was designed to be self-updating, receiving new instructions and capabilities through encrypted communications. This meant that whoever was controlling the operation could modify its scope and objectives in real time, responding to changes in Prince George's routine or security arrangements. One of the most troubling aspects of the case was the discovery that the surveillance system had been designed to target not just Prince George's current activities, but also to predict his future behavior. Analysis programs had been used to identify patterns in his daily routine, academic interests, and social relationships that could be used to anticipate his actions and movements. The psychological profile that emerged from the surveillance data painted a disturbing picture of how thoroughly Prince George's privacy had been violated. The watchers had access to his personal thoughts as expressed in private journals, his academic struggles and successes, his concerns about his future role, and even his teenage romantic interests. The investigation team had concluded that the surveillance operation was far too sophisticated and well-resourced to be the work of typical royal watchers such as overzealous fans, tabloid journalists, or even most criminal organizations. The technical capabilities demonstrated suggested involvement by parties with access to advanced surveillance technology and extensive financial resources. As the afternoon meeting progressed, the full implications of Prince George's discovery became clear. This was not simply a violation of the young prince's privacy, but a potential national security threat with implications for the entire royal family and the institutions they represented. The investigation would need to expand to include other members of the royal family and potentially other government officials who might have been targeted by similar surveillance operations. The evidence suggested that whoever was behind this operation had been building a comprehensive intelligence database about the British royal family for purposes that remained unclear, but were certainly unauthorized and potentially hostile. The sophistication of the surveillance and the international scope of the data transmission suggested that this could be part of a larger intelligence gathering operation with implications for national security. Sarah and Her team faced the challenge of conducting a thorough investigation while maintaining the secrecy necessary to protect both the royal family's safety and the integrity of the investigation itself. They would need to work with multiple agencies across different countries while avoiding any actions that might alert the surveillance operators to the fact that their operation had been discovered. The meeting concluded with the establishment of a joint task force that would coordinate the investigation across multiple agencies and jurisdictions. The priority would be to identify the parties responsible for the surveillance operation while implementing enhanced security measures to protect the royal family from any potential escalation of threats that might result from the discovery of the surveillance network. The breakthrough came 3 days after the joint task force had been established. Technical analyst David Harper from GCHQ had been working around the clock to trace the communication pathways used by the surveillance software when he discovered something that changed the entire direction of the investigation. Hidden within the encrypted data transmissions were fragments of communication protocols that matched systems used by a private security firm with connections to several controversial international contracts. Sarah Chen found herself in the unusual position of coordinating an investigation that now spanned multiple continents and involved intelligence agencies from 3 different countries. The surveillance operation Prince George had uncovered was proving to be far more extensive than anyone had initially imagined, with implications that reached into the highest levels of international politics and private security contracting. The private security firm that had been identified, Blackstone International, operated from offices in London, Geneva, and Dubai. On the surface, it appeared to be a legitimate company providing security services to wealthy individuals and corporations. However, deeper investigation revealed a web of subsidiary companies and shell corporations that made it difficult to determine who ultimately controlled the organization and funded its operations. GCHQ's analysis had revealed that the surveillance software installed on Prince George's computer was communicating with servers controlled by Blackstone International through a complex network of proxy servers and encrypted channels. The technical sophistication of this communication system suggested that the company had access to advanced cyber capabilities that went far beyond typical private security services. MI6 had contributed intelligence suggesting that Blackstone International had previously been involved in controversial surveillance operations in several foreign countries. The company had been linked to operations targeting political dissidents, journalists, and opposition leaders in countries where democratic governments were under pressure from authoritarian regimes. The fact that they were now apparently targeting a member of the British royal family raised serious questions about who was directing their activities. Prince George had been moved to a secure location while enhanced security sweeps were conducted throughout Windsor Castle. The young prince had handled the disruption to his routine with remarkable maturity, understanding that his discovery had uncovered something far more serious than a simple privacy violation. He continued to cooperate fully with investigators, providing additional details about suspicious incidents that took on new significance in light of the expanding investigation. The security sweeps at Windsor Castle had revealed the true extent of the surveillance operation. Hidden cameras had been discovered in locations throughout the castle, including areas that were supposed to be completely secure. The devices were so small and well-concealed that they had evaded detection during routine security inspections for months. Some had been integrated into existing fixtures and equipment in ways that required intimate knowledge of the castle's infrastructure. More disturbing was the discovery of sophisticated listening devices that had been planted in rooms used for sensitive family discussions and meetings with government officials. The implications were staggering. Conversations involving state secrets, security arrangements, and private family matters had potentially been monitored and recorded for months by unknown parties. The investigation had revealed that the surveillance operation was not limited to electronic devices. Physical surveillance had also been conducted using personnel who had gained access to the castle grounds through various cover identities. Background checks on recent staff additions revealed several individuals whose credentials did not withstand close scrutiny and who had disappeared after investigators began looking into their backgrounds. Sarah had worked with international law enforcement partners to identify the financial networks supporting Blackstone International's operations. The money trail led through offshore accounts and shell companies in multiple jurisdictions, making it difficult to trace the ultimate source of funding. However, patterns in the financial flows suggested connections to wealthy individuals and possibly foreign governments with interests in British political and security affairs. The psychological impact on Prince George was becoming a concern for his family and security team. While he maintained his composure publicly, those close to him could see the strain of learning that his privacy had been so thoroughly violated for such an extended period. Royal family counselors had been quietly brought in to help him process the emotional implications of the discovery while maintaining his ability to function normally in his public role. The investigation had expanded to include other members of the royal family after similar surveillance software was discovered on devices belonging to Prince William and Princess Catherine. The pattern suggested that the operation was designed to gather intelligence on the entire line of succession, possibly for purposes related to predicting or influencing future royal family decisions and policies. Technical analysis had revealed that the surveillance software was designed to capture not just current communications and activities, but also to build predictive models of royal family behavior. Artificial intelligence algorithms were being used to analyze the gathered data and identify patterns that could be used to anticipate future actions, travel plans, and decision-making processes. The discovery of the surveillance operation had triggered a comprehensive review of royal security protocols and procedures. Traditional security measures had proven inadequate against the sophisticated electronic surveillance capabilities employed by the operation. New countermeasures were being implemented that required expertise from the most advanced cybersecurity specialists available to the British government. Commander Morrison had been working with specialists from various agencies to develop enhanced security protocols that could protect against the types of surveillance techniques that had been employed against the royal family. The challenge was implementing these measures without significantly disrupting the royal family's ability to carry out their official duties and maintain some degree of normal family life. The international implications of the case had grown as evidence emerged suggesting that similar surveillance operations might be targeting other political figures and government officials in various countries. Intelligence sharing agreements were being activated to coordinate responses to what appeared to be a systematic campaign of surveillance against democratic institutions and their leaders. Blackstone International's operations in other countries were being investigated by local authorities working in coordination with British intelligence services. Evidence was emerging of a pattern of surveillance operations targeting individuals who played important roles in their respective countries' political and social systems. The scope of the organization's activities suggested resources and objectives that went far beyond typical private security services. The legal aspects of the case were proving complex, as the surveillance operation had been conducted across multiple jurisdictions with different laws and legal procedures. International cooperation agreements were being invoked to ensure that evidence could be gathered and prosecutions coordinated across different countries. The challenge was building cases that could withstand legal challenges while protecting sensitive intelligence sources and methods. Prince George had continued to provide valuable assistance to the investigation by helping analysts understand the timeline of suspicious incidents and identifying patterns that might not have been apparent to external observers. His detailed recollections and analytical thinking had proven crucial to understanding how the surveillance operation had been implemented and how it had evolved over time. The young prince had also demonstrated remarkable insight into the potential motivations behind the surveillance operation. His understanding of international politics and the role of the royal family in British society had helped investigators consider various scenarios for how the gathered intelligence might be intended to be used. His perspectives had contributed to threat assessments and security planning in ways that impressed even experienced intelligence professionals. The investigation had revealed that the surveillance operation appeared to be part of a larger intelligence gathering effort that included monitoring of government officials, military personnel, and other individuals with access to sensitive information. The pattern suggested systematic collection of intelligence that could be used for various purposes, from political influence operations to more traditional espionage activities. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Prince George's discovery had uncovered something far more significant than a simple violation of royal privacy. The surveillance operation appeared to be part of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering network with international connections and objectives that posed potential threats to national security and democratic institutions. The coordination between various agencies and international partners had begun to yield results as investigators worked to map the full extent of the surveillance network and identify the parties responsible for its operation. The complexity of the case required unprecedented cooperation between intelligence services, law enforcement agencies, and cybersecurity specialists from multiple countries. Sarah found herself at the center of an investigation that had implications she could never have imagined when she first received the urgent call to Windsor Castle. The young prince's discovery had opened a window into a world of sophisticated surveillance operations that challenged traditional concepts of privacy, security, and national sovereignty in the digital age. 6 weeks after Prince George's discovery, the Joint International Task Force had assembled enough evidence to begin coordinated arrests across 3 continents. The operation, codenamed Royal Shield, was launched simultaneously in London, Geneva, Dubai, and 6 other cities where Blackstone International and its network of affiliated companies maintained operations. Detective Inspector Sarah Chun watched from the Scotland Yard Command Center as reports came in from teams around the world. The scale of what Prince George had uncovered became fully apparent as arrest warrants were executed and evidence was seized from Blackstone International facilities. Computer servers contained terabytes of surveillance data not just on the British royal family, but on political leaders, business executives, journalists, and activists from dozens of countries. The operation had been far more extensive than anyone had initially imagined. Marcus Blackstone, the founder and CEO of Blackstone International, was arrested at his London headquarters as he attempted to destroy computer equipment containing evidence of the surveillance operations. A former intelligence officer with connections to several European security services, Blackstone had built his company by recruiting specialists with experience in government surveillance programs. His client list read like a catalog of controversial political figures and authoritarian regimes from around the world. The investigation revealed that the surveillance operation targeting Prince George had been commissioned by a consortium of wealthy individuals with political interests that conflicted with British foreign policy positions. The goal had been to gather intelligence that could be used to predict and potentially influence royal family decisions on matters of public policy and international relations. The royal family's symbolic importance and their ability to influence public opinion made them valuable targets for such an operation. Prince George had returned to Windsor Castle under enhanced security arrangements that reflected the new understanding of the threats facing the royal family in the digital age. The young prince had grown visibly during the ordeal, demonstrating a maturity and understanding of complex security issues that impressed even experienced protection officers. His careful handling of the initial discovery had been crucial to the success of the investigation and the dismantling of the surveillance network. The technical investigation had revealed the sophisticated nature of the surveillance software that had been planted on royal family devices. The programs were designed to operate undetected for extended periods while gathering comprehensive intelligence on their targets' communications, movements, relationships, and decision-making processes. The data was then analyzed using artificial intelligence systems to identify patterns and predict future behavior. Commander Morrison had implemented a complete overhaul of royal security protocols based on lessons learned from the investigation. New cybersecurity measures included regular sweeps for surveillance software, enhanced encryption for royal communications, and specialized training for security personnel on digital threats. The traditional model of royal protection had been expanded to include expertise in cyber warfare and electronic surveillance. The international cooperation that had been essential to the investigation's success had also led to new agreements for sharing intelligence about threats to democratic institutions and their leaders. The Blackstone International case had demonstrated how private surveillance companies could be used by hostile actors to target political figures across national boundaries, requiring coordinated responses from multiple countries. Sarah had been awarded recognition for her role in coordinating the complex international investigation, but she knew that the real credit belonged to Prince George for his careful observation and mature handling of a situation that could have had catastrophic consequences if mishandled. The young prince's discovery had not only protected his own family, but had exposed a threat to democratic institutions around the world. The legal proceedings against Blackstone International and its operatives were expected to continue for years, as prosecutors in multiple countries worked to build cases against the various participants in the surveillance operation. The complexity of the evidence and the international scope of the crimes would require unprecedented cooperation between different legal systems and jurisdictions. The investigation had revealed connections between Blackstone International and other private intelligence companies operating in gray areas between legitimate security services and outright espionage operations. The industry of private surveillance had grown rapidly in recent years, taking advantage of technological advances and regulatory gaps to offer services that pushed the boundaries of legal and ethical surveillance practices. Prince George had testified before a closed session of Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee about his discovery and its implications for royal security and national defense. His testimony had been praised by committee members for its clarity and insight, and had contributed to discussions about new legislation to regulate private surveillance companies and protect public figures from unauthorized surveillance. The psychological impact assessment conducted on Prince George had concluded that while the discovery of the surveillance operation had been disturbing, his mature handling of the situation and the successful resolution of the threat had actually contributed to his development and confidence. Royal family counselors had worked with him to process the experience and ensure that it would not create lasting anxiety about privacy and security issues. The technology industry had begun implementing new standards for detecting and preventing the types of surveillance software that had been used against the royal family. The Blackstone International case had highlighted vulnerabilities in computer security systems that could be exploited by sophisticated attackers, leading to improvements in cybersecurity practices across various sectors. Educational institutions had incorporated lessons from the case into their cybersecurity and digital literacy curricula, using Prince George's experience as an example of how individuals could protect themselves from digital surveillance, and what to do if they discovered evidence of unauthorized monitoring. The prince had agreed to participate in educational materials about digital privacy and security, sharing his experience to help others protect themselves. The media coverage of the case had been carefully managed to protect sensitive details about royal security arrangements while still informing the public about the threats posed by private surveillance companies. Prince George had given a carefully prepared statement about his experience, emphasizing the importance of vigilance about digital privacy and the need for strong legal protections against unauthorized surveillance. Foreign governments had expressed concern about the implications of the Blackstone International case for their own security arrangements, leading to reviews of protection protocols for political leaders and other high-profile figures. The case had demonstrated how private surveillance companies could pose threats to democratic institutions that went beyond traditional espionage concerns. The royal family had used the experience to strengthen their understanding of modern security challenges and their role in protecting democratic institutions. Prince George's discovery had led to broader discussions about the responsibilities of public figures in the digital age and the need for enhanced security awareness among political leaders and their families. Research institutions had begun studying the case as an example of how technological advances could be misused to threaten privacy and democratic institutions. The surveillance techniques employed by Blackstone International had pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible, requiring new approaches to protection and detection that combined traditional security methods with advanced cybersecurity capabilities. The success of Operation Royal Shield had been recognized as a model for international cooperation in addressing modern security threats that crossed traditional boundaries between law enforcement, intelligence work, and cybersecurity. The case had demonstrated the need for new forms of collaboration between different agencies and countries to address threats posed by private surveillance companies and other non-state actors. Prince George had emerged from the experience with a deeper understanding of the security challenges facing the royal family and democratic institutions in the modern world. His discovery and mature handling of the surveillance operation had not only protected his own privacy, but had contributed to broader efforts to defend democratic societies against sophisticated surveillance threats. The case had also highlighted the importance of digital literacy and security awareness for young people growing up in an increasingly connected world. Prince George's experience had become a powerful example of how individuals could recognize and respond to digital threats, and his story had been used to educate others about the importance of protecting their privacy and security in the digital age. As Sarah Chun reflected on the investigation that had consumed months of her career, she was struck by how a young prince's careful observation and mature response to suspicious activity had uncovered a threat with implications far beyond the royal family. The case had changed her understanding of modern security challenges and had demonstrated the crucial role that individual vigilance played in protecting democratic institutions from sophisticated surveillance operations. The legacy of Prince George's discovery would continue to influence security practices and legal frameworks for years to come, as governments and institutions work to address the challenges posed by private surveillance companies and other emerging threats to privacy and democratic governance in the digital age.